in your case, just remember regarding the lights that you do have the light dome and you might need to redirect these textures. Okay. If you are using the structure that was provided, then it should be loading automatically. You should need to worry about that. Regarding the shader for the robot, the materials of the robot do require some redirecting of the textures, and but that's pretty much it. If you don't have the textures or if you don't want to spend too much time working on that, then just create a basic, I would say, orange shader metallic surface so that you can see some reflections, and it'll serve the same purpose in this case. So let's say we would want to render the robot separately. What other elements would be interesting for us to have here? In my case, I'm thinking that the most the things that we will definitely want to isolate are the sparks. As mentioned before, the sparks are something that we will render without motion blur. Okay, so these will be rendered separately, but we definitely want the sparks to be visible or to be affecting the reflections on the surface of the robot. Okay. The other thing is we also want to have the electrical elements affecting the light on the robot and the reflections and all that. And the same thing goes for the particles. We also want the particles to affect the lighting of the robot and affect the reflections. So let's start with the particles. Let's explore the look of the particles and then we will address everything else. So the particles are essentially the main element that will kind of be the cause or the origin for everything else. So it makes sense for us to start with the particles. Regarding the particles, let's create a Redshift node specifically for the particles. I'm going to say CGFX particles or blast. Let's go with blast. I'm going to grab this name and I'm going to put it here. Control V. CGFX blast. Objects. We don't need anything on this one except for the particles. We don't even need the light for now. We're going to be having the particles be self-illuminated, so that's something we don't need to worry about. If you want, for the time being, just be able to look at something, you can definitely include at this point. Let's keep the dome, the light dome here on the force lights, and also the sphere. Let's keep these two just so we can do the first renders of the particles. So regarding the particles, what do we need? We need to make sure that we go to Redshift, particle section, render as particles. Now, this will hint you immediately to one essential element attribute that you need to have on your particles, which is the p-scale. At this point, we may have p-scale on some of them, but we don't. We actually don't have any particles. So let's go to a frame where we actually have particles. So let's go maybe frame 10. This is probably too much. Let's go with 70. Okay, 1070. So at this point, we have a bunch of particles, but we don't have p-scale. So let's make sure we assign some p-scale. I'm going to create a point wrangle. We could just create an attribute create, but we will want to control the p-scale in a more advanced way. So just creating the attribute wouldn't give us wouldn't be of much interest. So set attributes. Let's say it's a float, p-scale. It's going to be equal to some channel. I'm going to call this max size. We're going to be using this channel later on as well. And the maximum size we want for the particles, let's say 0.005. Now, even without a shader, we should be able to see something at this point. Just make sure that you include the RNDR blast particles on your force objects. Let's have a look. I'm actually gonna reopen from here and hit render. and we have a lot of particles. As you can see, the particles are gigantic, even at this scale. So we need to bring this down a bit. Let's go with 0.001, hit render. Okay, so this seems like a more appropriate size for the number of particles that we have and the type of effect that we're going to be rendering out. We're not rendering any motion blur at this point. So if we go to Redshift, motion blur, it's disabled. Okay. The main idea behind the shader for the particles will be that we have particles that will be shrinking through time. They will also have their opacity animated through time so that they kind of fade away slowly. The other thing is we want them to be self-illuminating, and the density of the particles will should be enough to give us a sense of more of something almost like smoke, even though it's not nothing like smoke, otherwise we would render it like smoke. But the idea is that it will have something more of energy feel, a plasma feel, something like that.